Lupita Nyong'o stood on that Oscar stage in 2014 and smiled with ease and confidence. Her name echoed through the halls of Hollywood. You won't believe what was going on behind that pretty smile, though. I want you to know that while the cameras were rolling and the crowd cheered, she was going through a lot of pain that not many people knew about. The year she had her biggest win was also the year she heard news that would change her life. She had been told she had uterine tumors. She told only a few close friends at first because she thought it was something she could handle alone. Now, though, things start to get interesting. There was more than one reason she didn't say anything. People had taught her and a lot of other women that having painful periods and heavy bleeding was just part of being a woman. She carried this weight for years while still working, smiling, and inspiring a lot of people. On the inside, though, the signs were getting worse. She was tired, had severe cramps, and felt dizzy sometimes, but she ignored them because she thought she had to keep going. The story was unique because it wasn't just about her pain, it was about how millions of women, mostly black women, were going through the same thing but didn't say anything because they thought they had no choice. The weirdest thing was that so many people had fibroids, but almost no one talked about them. The scary part comes next. These signs are often ignored by doctors who say they are normal or not a big deal, but the pain was killing their energy, health, and even their dreams of having children. Lupita also felt like she was being thrown out. Even though she had been to the doctors, they told her to take drugs and rest, but she knew something wasn't right. She still kept it from everyone. A woman living her dream was shown on her Instagram and in interviews, but when she wasn't in the spotlight, she planned her days around her pain, figuring out how to get through shooting schedules without letting anyone see how weak she was. Things took a sudden turn for the worse when, after a long day on set, she fell asleep on her bed and clutched her stomach, realizing she couldn't keep quiet any longer. That's when she began to wonder if she, with all her fame and money, felt forgotten and pushed aside. What about the women who couldn't speak up or get the best medical care? That thought grew inside her, starting a movement she hadn't meant to lead but knew she had to do. Lupita knew that the longer she kept quiet, the worse things got for everyone. She thought back to the years when she had just accepted the pain as part of her life and forced herself to smile during red carpets, interviews, and endless shooting schedules. This is how the cycle went on for a lot of women. Even their best friends didn't know how much pain they were in because they learned how to hide it so well. But this is the shocking part. Fibroids are not cancer, but they can make a woman's life very different. You feel like you don't belong in your own body because you're bloated and bleeding a lot. The pelvic pain is so bad that you can't stand straight. Millions of women still thought this was okay, though. Lupita read more to find out what was going on, and what she found shocked her. Not only were black women more likely to get fibroids, but their symptoms were often worse and started earlier in life and grew faster, according to studies. The craziest thing was that scientists still didn't know why. New treatments were hard to come by because there wasn't enough money or knowledge, and the main option was always the same: painful surgeries. Now things start to get interesting. Lupita learned that a lot of women were being told that the only thing they could do was have an abortion, which removes the uterus and ends the chance of ever having children. Because no one had spent money on better medicines, she thought about all the young women who might want to have children but were told their wombs had to be taken out. Lupita was able to speak out, which makes this story unique. She had the power to bring the issue to light, but she hadn't done so in years. Now she felt bad about keeping quiet because she felt guilty. It brought back a talk with a friend who had been out of work for weeks because of fibroid pain and was told by her boss that she needed to toughen up. Lupita realized how strong the shame was after that. It wasn't just the medical system that didn't care about women, it was the whole way of life. She thought about what might happen if she told her story. It might make other women want to talk, expect better care, and push for change. He was afraid that people would judge her, feel sorry for her, and look into her private life in the news. But destiny had already pushed her so far that she could no longer keep quiet. She was afraid that many other women would suffer in silence, just like she had, if she didn't speak out now. She almost made up her mind, but she knew that once she said the words out loud, she couldn't change her mind. Lupita finally chose to talk, but it wasn't at a press gathering or in a magazine interview. She instead took out her phone, wrote out the truth, and posted it on Instagram during Fibroid Awareness Month. The wave it made will blow your mind. Women from all over the world started commenting right away, telling her, "I've been through this too." They wrote about years of getting the wrong diagnosis and not being able to have children because they weren't given other treatment choices. With sad heart, Lupita read each message. She knew that her story was only a small part of something much bigger. But now comes the shocking part. Many of the women who sent her messages had never talked about it in public before. They were brave enough to speak out after reading her post. Now things start to get interesting. Lupita's statement did more than just bring attention to fibroids. It also showed that women's health care has been deeply and persistently ignored. There were calls from reporters, health groups, and even politicians who wanted to talk about the problem. Now that her pain was being talked about in public, it was her who was at the center of it. She started to work with advocacy groups and add her voice to efforts for more money for research, better training for doctors, and insurance coverage for newer, less invasive treatments. The most crazy thing was that these attempts were already reaching people. Schools were talking about reproductive health, hospitals were having seminars, and social media was full of stories from women who finally felt like they were being heard. Lupita knew they had a long way to go, but she had gone from being a silent sufferer to a loud champion. Things didn't go as planned with Destiny. She used to have to hide her pain because of her fame, but now she used it to bring it to light. She was no longer just an actor. She fought for women's health and spoke up for those who didn't have one. One thing became clear to her as the movement grew. It wasn't enough to... As Lupita's voice got stronger, the people in charge felt more pressure. She started working with lawmakers to push for bills that would give more money to study into fibroid, make less invasive treatments more available, and make sure doctors took women's symptoms seriously. Once her story made national news, the talk changed so quickly you won't believe it. People who used to brush off patients were now being questioned by doctors. Politicians who had never talked about the health of women's uteruses were now being asked what they thought about the problem. However, this is what shocks me. Even with all the attention, there were still a lot of women who were suffering in quiet because they couldn't afford the right care or even get a correct diagnosis. Now things start to get interesting. Lupita saw that the fight wasn't just about knowing what was going on, it was about fixing a system that had failed women for many years. She pushed for programs that would reach out to the community, mobile clinics, and educational efforts that would teach women about the signs they should never ignore. The craziest part was seeing how her one honest act set off a chain of events. The movement grew as famous women, campaigners, and regular women spoke out about their own lives. It spread to many countries and cultures. This story is different because it stayed in the news for more than a few weeks. It got bigger. Women started to ask for second views, doubt their doctors, and refuse to accept that being a woman meant being in pain. Things went in a direction that no one saw coming. What started out as Lupita's personal struggle changed into a strong force for change. She overcame her fear of being judged, got over the shame, and turned her pain into something useful. When she spoke to a crowd at a health gathering for women, she told them the words that had become her mission: silence saves no one. The women who were listening were filled with hope, which was even louder than the cheers, because they knew someone else felt the same way and no longer had to act like no one heard them.